If you're looking for a break from the sun, this fantastic shade project is an awesome idea that you can incorporate, especially if you have a patio or a deck or just an outdoor seating area that you want to add some sun protection or shade to. And this comes from John, who shared this about a year ago for his lanai, as you can see here, which is a outdoor area in Hawaii. Most homes and apartments, different things have them. And even if you don't live in Hawaii, you might have a covered or an area that you want to be covered, that you want to add some shade protection. And this frame is just a really simple way that you can do that. And it utilizes a couple of materials that you may not know about. They are EMT conduit, which is this metal tubing that you'll see here. And then the fittings that are joining those pieces of conduit together are made by us in upstate South Carolina. They're maker pipe clamps, and they're made so you can build all kinds of awesome projects like this shade. Now, we can see here that it's a very beautiful landscape, and the shade overall isn't too complicated. It attaches to the side of their house here, and just has 3 vertical posts that support the main panel of the sunshade. And this is a really great idea if you've got an area that you want to be covered, and it's not too expensive, not as expensive as a lot of the prefabbed options that you'll see out there for adding shade protection or sun protection and shade to areas like this. But essentially, by using 3/4 inch EMT conduit maker pipe clamps, you can customize this for pretty much any dimension, any space. And I would recommend that you start with the sunshade itself. And I would recommend that you get something, you can find them on Amazon, not too expensive, and lots of places online. And I would recommend that you start with that and kind of build your frame around it, because you can see the technique for securing the sunshade to the frame is to kind of build the frame where it has a larger footprint than the sunshade itself, and then use something to attach the sunshade. So I would start with that, find a dimension that matches the space that you want to cover, and then you can build the frame and customize the dimensions after that. And we'll talk more about that as we go through, but I just wanted to mention that at the get-go in case you're wondering about how to customize the dimensions and figure that out. And whenever you're cutting EMT conduit, you can use a handheld rotating pipe and tube cutter. It's a really great way to cut EMT conduit. Pretty simple, just kind of time consuming, but besides that, works really well and is a great method for cutting EMT conduit and getting these custom dimensions. And you don't need any power tools or electricity, so you can build it out there and cut conduit and all right in the same spot outside where you're building it at. So that's really cool. And the same thing actually goes for maker pipe connectors. You can assemble those with 5mm hex wrench. You don't need to do any drilling or welding or anything like that. So you can cut and assemble this whole project outside in the area that you're wanting it to be. So just wanted to mention those things. That's important as you're building. But essentially, we'll just go through and break this down. And like I said, there's 3 vertical supports, and we'll kind of talk about those first. I would recommend that you start with by building the 2-dimensional panel that we're going to look at, and then kind of put that in place. Maybe get someone to help you hold it up while you get these verticals in place. But if you're building by yourself, then you might need to kind of build the whole thing on the ground first, and then raise it up and secure it to the roof, as we're going to look at here in a minute. But I'll just kind of break it down and talk about it, and then just depending on the situation that you're in, you can decide the best way to put it together. But essentially, it just consists of these 3 verticals that go all the way down to the patio, and they're not really secured to anything from what I can see. Looks like they just have rubber pipe feet on the end, which are a really great accessory to use in situations like this, or really anything that you want to have sitting on the ground and look nice, kind of cleans up the end of the conduit, and also protects, if you've got hardwood floors or something like that, the rubber pipe feet work really well. And you can also use something like the plastic end caps that push into the end. Just kind of depends on the situation and what you want to use. But those 3 verticals are attached to this 2-dimensional rectangle using maker pipe T connectors, and those are just a fitting. It's really popular, really versatile, because it joins 2 pieces of conduit together in this T fashion, where you have the vertical that goes up, and then as we looked at that blue line there, but then you have this horizontal piece that runs continuously through the top half of the T connector, and that is just going through that T connector up there, as we can see. And it's the same thing for all 3 of these verticals. It's just the T connector is attaching to this long horizontal bar. So you've got those 3 things there, and that is what the verticals that are going down to the patio are attached to. And then we can see there's a lot more T connectors. I think pretty much this is all T connectors with the exception of one more connector that we'll look at, but we've got another T connector here. Just this one is angled on its side instead of straight up and down, and that just allows this long horizontal span to go from one side of the canopy to the other side, as we can see there. And then there's going to be another T connector back here where this connects, and this just goes all the way across. And then we can see that there is a T connector here, which is being used for this horizontal piece that goes all the way to the back. and then you guessed it, another T-connector in the back here to attach that horizontal beam. So pretty much that horizontal beam is not extended like we'll look at. So just use 2 T-connectors to just capture that piece of conduit in between the two. And then it's the same technique actually over here for this cross beam as well. So just those horizontal cross beams are just being supported, and just the 2 T-connectors are attaching them. But what's different about the 3 poles that the verticals are attached to is they extend a little bit past the frame. And the way that they did that here is with the T connector, as we saw, because the piece of conduit can run continuously through it, it wasn't a problem here. But whenever you're building something and the dimension is larger than 10 feet, which is what you'll find empty conduit in the hardware store, that's the length that's going to come. So if you're working with something over that dimension, you're going to have to extend it. And a really common connector that you can use to do this is the MakerPipe 180 degree connector, which you can't really see here because I've marked over this a bunch, but essentially it's the 180 degree connector, as we can see there, which essentially just allows that piece of conduit to run continuously through it and extend out a little bit, as we can see there, and then it breaks up the horizontal span a little bit. So there's just a little bit of gap between the 2 pieces, and so it's not one continuous, which works pretty well in this situation because you need to extend it past that dimension anyway. So essentially it's just going to break up, and then it's just going to terminate inside of the half there, and then then just keep going and extend it to get that dimension that you're after. So pretty simple just to use that 180 degree connector. And they did the same thing that we saw with the first vertical, where it's just a T connector extending that. It's really just needed in the middle here because this dimension is over 10 foot and you have to extend it somehow, and that's a really simple way to do it. And then it's the exact same thing in the back here. We can see 180 degree connector, so that piece of conduit runs continuously through to extend, and then they've got the 2 pieces. I'm going to use a different color here. This long horizontal span that's extending from one side of the roof to the other runs through all the other T connectors, except it's just broken up here. So it's not running continuously through. It's because of that 180 degree connector, it needs to be broken up to achieve that dimension that's over 10 foot. And so the horizontal piece that's running from the front to the back is running continuously through it, but the other piece is terminating and kind of split in half to get that dimension that they're after. So essentially that's all you need. Is just a bunch of T connectors and then those 2 180 degree connectors to break up that horizontal span and to add that extra length. And then that you can see how that works really well to add some length to the front. And also they did that so they could add some length to the back. And I want to get rid of this picture now, and we can kind of zoom in here and see where they did that. So the pieces of conduit that are extending through there and kind of going a little bit past, those are being used to secure the canopy to the house on this part of the build. So we can see here that there is a conduit. It looks like either a 1-hole or a 2-hole strap, which essentially just snaps onto the conduit and then has tabs that you can add some screws into to secure that to flat surfaces. So it looks like wherever they've got this extended a little bit, that's where they've got some of the straps using to secure that to the house, which is really important to get that nice and secure there, especially since this isn't, it doesn't have a flange or anything securing it to the patio. That's the only connection point. So you want that to be strong, of course, and you might want to add more of those. You can also kind of flip those over on its side and attach them to the horizontal beam that runs from one side to the other. If you've got a spot to do that. I don't think they do. That's why they had to extend it. But something else you could do, and something to keep in mind really, is because this is positioned underneath this roof that's already overhanging, I think that's really good because the rain is not going to, or because the rain is going to kind of fall on it and then keep rolling off. So that's something to keep in mind, is to kind of, set this back a little bit underneath the roof that you have already existing. That way you don't run the risk of it, falling, the water falling on the ground underneath. It'll actually hit that and then continue to roll off the patio. So it really keeps this dry underneath, which is helpful for rain. And then of course it shades the sun as well. And something to keep in mind too is you'll probably want this to be sloped because of that. And what I would do is just kind of shorten these vertical legs a little bit so that you get a nice slope there, so that rain does pool, or does roll off instead of pool on top of the shade. I think that would be really helpful there, and kind of keep that from pulling on top, because you don't want that, because that water is going to get heavy if it pulls up on top of there, and then that's going to cause it to potentially fall apart, which of course we don't want. So That's really something important to keep in mind. And we can see here where the sunshade also has those vertical supports, or utilizes those vertical supports to kind of keep that from happening. It kind of pulls that tight and keeps it from creating one large place for the water to pool up. Those vertical or those horizontal beams are kind of supporting it underneath, which helps a lot. And then we can see here that they, of course, made the dimensions so it's a little bit larger than the footprint of the sunshade, as I was mentioning, which allows you to fully stretch out the sunshade completely. And they just used ball bungees to accomplish that, which are a really great accessory to use in this kind of a situation, especially if your sunshade has grommets. I would recommend looking for a sunshade and prioritizing finding grommets so that you can do this really easily. But these ball bungees are really simple to use, and they're also really easy to take apart. So if you did, there's going to be a big storm coming through and you want to take the sunshade down, you can easily just pop off those ball bungees and take the sunshade off, and you don't have to worry too much about the rain pooling on top in that scenario. And then the EMT conduit and the connectors should hold up just fine in wind. I think they said that they've already gotten a couple of windstorms around 20 miles an hour, and they said it held up great. So that's really good to hear, and just something to keep in mind when you're building. But you could easily take off that sunshade if you're worried too much about storms coming through. But that's essentially it. Like I said, not too complicated of a shade, just a lot of T connectors, and you could customize this pretty much infinitely. I mean, you could use that 180-degree technique to extend this even further if you've got a really large area that you're trying to shade. Or you can make it really small if you got a smaller footprint, but fully customize this. Like I said, using the rotating pipe and tube cutter to get the dimensions that you're after is really easy, and you can customize this totally. So really awesome, John. Thanks so much for sharing this. We could post it in the community. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those down below, and we'll try to do what we can to help. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.